Hey guys, Gordon Cockerpunk here. It's been a while since I did a paintball video, so figured I would make one. There's a thread I posted a while back that caused a little bit of a ruckus on a few different forums, and got a couple of people's panties in quite the bunch, which, as a retired troll, I was pretty pleased about actually. But trolling is a lifestyle after all, and so you know, when it comes up, you can be quite proud of it. The thread was about this gun here, which is an Azoden Chaos, which has been fitted with one of those zero kick balance valve systems, just a $5 torpedo reg that I had laying around, and just a generic ASA, not even an on-off without even the proper macroline fittings. Does have a clamping feed neck though. Anyway, although the Azoden clamping feed neck would be just fine. I actually got this gun in parts from Mike probably like 2 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago. And I never put it together and shot it until now, and it shoots really freaking good. Good enough that I in fact said that I was going to shoot this gun whenever I played semi-automatic all summer. And I'm still going to do that because it shoots freaking awesome. This blew up in a lot of people's minds, but I really didn't think it was that big of a deal, because after, you've played with guns like this, or, even, your favorite semi-auto guns are guns like these, then, like, why would, this gun be any, like, horror story to anyone? It really shouldn't, but lots of people, especially a couple people on AO, really got a little antsy in their pantsies about it. Really, I mean, it's kind of a quiet protest at the end of the day, in the same way that, like, the first time I ever went to Living Legends was Living Legends 1, and Sal from Total Grief got up on stage and said he was a pump gun player, and would all the pump gun players raise their hands. It was, like, me and Bryce and, like, a couple of the Total Grief guys, and like no one else in a huge crowd like at Living Legends. And we like somehow, now pump play, like, I just remember in like 2001, 2002, I had to explain to people what a pump action gun even was. And like, why would you possibly want to do that? And, we've come so far in terms of understanding that. But in a certain way, it's been a hollow, a hollow victory, because we switched lots of people from $1,200 electronic guns to $600, $700, $800 pump guns. It's like, it just didn't quite have that. And then, I started playing a lot of mechanical, because I've always liked mechanical guns, Cockers and Mags in particular. So I've been shooting those a lot, and now, those are kind of coming up in the same way that pump guns were coming up 5-10 years ago. And we're getting a revival in like these kind of guns being cool again, and that's great, except for it's still kind of, this is like a $300 automag. You can get automags, mechanical automags, and they'll be $700. It's like Cockers are coming back in resale, especially like the really special ones. It's like, it's ridiculous, when like the whole point all along, the reason why we switched to pump guns in the first place, was to prove to people that like the hierarchy of gun technologies didn't actually matter. What mattered is like playing the actual game. And so that's why we started playing with pump guns. But then what we did is we created a whole new hierarchy of pump guns, where you start with like a tracer or whatever, and then you get Fanta, and then you get a sniper, then you get a CCM, and there's like a whole other spectrum of mini little arms race going on right there. So then we switched to mechanical guns, and then now there's just like a little mini arms race there. And, in some ways I'm perfectly well guilty of it. I traded in a black RT Classic for this, super rare edition red splash, and I have a Merlin autococker and those sorts of things. And so in a lot of ways, this is my kind of last protest and the last bastion of the idea that technology doesn't actually matter in paintball. And this is, shockingly similar to the gun I actually started playing paintball on in like, 2000? In the year 2000, yeah. I had a Spider like that. It didn't have a balanced valve, but shockingly similar. The trigger frame's identical almost, and so it's kind of my last protest. It's kind of the last place you can go if that's what you're looking for. And so it shoots really, really well. I'm pretty pleased with it in general. Consistent, doesn't kick. But one of the, and the man, I'm not going to give you a shout out because I don't remember who you were and I don't want to look it up, but there's some people who made some quite astute comments. As much as I was laughing at the people who were trolling and couldn't handle the fact that someone would, be okay with shooting a blowback after having owned one of pretty much every gun ever made in paintball. So, the astute comment was the one, Gordon, the last time you were ranting on the YouTubes about paintball, it was to try and get people to shoot better, more fragile, more round paint, so that way manufacturers would make better, rounder paint and sell it, and it would be available at fields. And in much the same way that, a long time ago we said you should use a barrel that is smaller than the paintball you're shooting, and this was almost impossible with everything except for certain setups like the Freak and things like that. And so, now 5 years later, 6 years later, most barrels are available in very small sizes, In that same way, we should have more brittle, better, rounder paint, and you should be willing to pay an extra premium for it. Still a very valid rant. But the problem with these folks is, or the problem that these folks raised was, blowbacks aren't particularly nice on paint. And they're right. Blowbacks aren't very good on paint. Azodins in particular are not very good on paint. The Azodin Chaos Pump is not a good gun on paint because of fundamental flaws. So, what I wanted to do, long introduction, sorry. The real topic of the video is right now. How to make your blowback or other miscellaneous stack tube gun nicer on paint. Now what I've done with this gun to make it nicer on paint, and it is quite nice on paint, I've shot quite brittle paint through this. Number one, if you don't care about speed, which, especially with mechanical guns, who cares, don't use a force feed loader. Use a loader like this. This is like a Revolution from like 1998, and not putting force on the balls in the first place will make your gun more gentle on paint. Number two, and this is the one complaint I have about most Smart Parts guns, and quite a lot of other guns, like Shockers in particular, have a terrible, and Luxes even still have this problem. I call it rollback. Let me grab a paintball quick. Sorry, I don't have any right here on hand. I just grabbed the guns. So, rollback is when, and you can tell you have a rollback problem in your gun when you just drop a paintball into the feed tube and you look at it, and if it rolls substantially backwards in the chamber, you have a rollback problem. I would measure substantially as, I've seen it as bad as 1/8 of an inch, and I've seen it, something like a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch rollback is a big problem. Because what this means is that, balls are round, and so when this one rolls back, the one in front of it, especially if it's with a force feed loader, kind of comes in front of it. They kind of tessellate like this. So when your bolt comes forward, it has to push this ball out of the way, and then it probably actually strikes that ball as it picks it off the stack, and so that ball at the top gets damaged. Cheap guns in particular, like the Azodin Chaos Pump, the bolt is like more than 1/8 of an inch too short. Like, it's hugely too short. So you can make your bolt longer. Especially if you have a rollback problem. What I've done on this gun is attach, I epoxied a O-ring that I fitted out of, it's custom fit, right, for the thickness that I wanted it to be. The other nice thing about this is an O-ring is a little bit softer than Delrin, so it's a little bit better in that regard as well. The actual physical strike might be better, but the big one is preventing the rollback. And if you look in these guns, Um, the rollback is not too bad now that I've set that. You want to make sure that you measure this all out before you go ahead and put that in your gun. Make sure they load in behind the detent, because if you make the bolt too short, then it won't load in fully past the detent. So what's interesting though is that the feed tube, I don't know if there's enough light, but if you can actually see in that feed tube there, the bolt, there's actually a corner of the bolt that's showing in through the feed tube, but it still feeds just fine. That's just how much rollback there was initially in the whole design. So, fix rollback. The nice side of that, with doing it with an O-ring like that, this is an open face bolt. Flat face bolts are actually easier, and I'm a fan of flat face bolts in general because they usually don't have this rollback problem. But anyway, make it shorter, make it softer. The next thing that I did to this is I put like a cure style ramp on the top. Very simple to do, and I've always wanted someone to go into business making cure style bolts for cockers, for mags and things like that, because I think there's a small fortune to be gained. Unfortunately, PE correctly patented all that information, so nobody can make a dime off of it. So I can't sell these for money, I can't do this modification for money, but doing something like that will decrease stack clipping. Now you can tell you have stack clipping in your gun, and it works especially well with mechanical blowback guns. To test for stack clipping, what I do is I put one paintball in, and I put a second paintball in, and then I just set my finger on the top of that second ball and just apply a little bit of force. And so then I pull the trigger here, and you can actually feel with your finger how far up the ball gets pushed back into the feed tube. And so as you follow the evolution of the cure bolt, where it went from just a ramp like this to a whole slot to prevent that shoving of the paintball up, I'm a fan of just doing this much, because you would need a lathe and some good O-ring fitting to make anything like the big channel in the later cure bolts. Those would be nicer on paint though. If you have access to a lathe, do it, because this makes stack clipping less of a problem. It's even better if your bolt is small enough that it actually doesn't even clip that thing in the first place. So those are a couple of the principles I used. The reason why I didn't do that, like I said, is and you have to watch out on how much you file off the tip of your bolt, because again, especially when we're talking about guns with short bolts in the first place, you need to make sure that by the time the valve opens, and you can line it up in a blowback gun fairly easily, by the time the valve starts to open, you can't have any of that showing, because otherwise it won't seal properly and you'll have velocity problems. So you are constrained in this way. Now, like I said, if you have a lathe available to you very easily, just copy the later cure bolts literally with an O-ring fit right there, and so then it would you could file this back way back, and as long as you had an O-ring to seal it, it would work great. So basically what I've done is done the cure feature, and then watch the length of the bolt. You can always tell rollback. Rollback is a huge problem, and it's one of the easiest ones to fix. I don't know why, even as late as guns like the Lux, we were having rollback problems. I mean, you put a ball in a Lux and you looked at it and it rolled back. Like, it's absurd. But there's lots of guns with too short of bolts like that, and so that's an easy fix as well. So in this way, I can make my $100 blowback gun really quite nice on paint. Maybe not, Ego 13 nice on paint, Ego 14 nice on paint, but at least, I can get good tournament paint out of a blowback gun very easily. Reducing loading pressure, reducing blowback, reducing stack clipping. Bing, bang, boom. It does a great job, and this gun shoots phenomenal. So, that's why I did it, and those are a few of the features that I built into it. So, you guys have a good one. Talk to you later.